WNBC brings you Loy York Erskine, soldier of 2 world wars, novelist, explorer, and educator, to tell in his own words one of the actual experiences of Ren Frew of the Mounted, a story based on his own first-hand knowledge of the Canadian Mounted Police. Ren Frew of the Mounted has long been one of the best-loved heroes of adventure, mystery, and exploration, known to millions of American boys and girls, and men and women, too. His adventures have been published in a series of famous books. For more than 15 years, he was the favorite hero in America's greatest magazine for boys. So tonight, WNBC is presenting Ren Frew of the Mounted as an experiment in radio. An experiment to determine whether or not today's generation will enjoy Ren Frew as much as their counterparts of yesterday. If you enjoy the program you're about to hear, just write a card to Ren Frew, R-E-N-F-R-E-W, care of WNBC, New York 20, New York. We would appreciate your comments. And now, here is Loy York Erskine to tell you about tonight's adventure with Ren Frew of the Mounted.
Good evening, friends. This is the story of how Ren Frew of the Mounted solved the mystery of the Arctic that was preserved for him in ice. It started when reports reached the headquarters of the Mounted Police that a white man had been killed by Eskimos in the remote northern extreme of Baffin's Island, which you'll find on the map just about 1,500 miles south of the North Pole. The name of the missing white man was Robert Slade, a fur trader who was notorious for his violent and ungovernable temper. He had quarreled with and driven out of the territory, the only white friend he had. And now came this rumor that the natives had killed him. So Inspector Ren Frew was sent north to investigate. In July, he sailed on a trading schooner to Pond's Inlet on the northern rim of Baffin's Island, where he had to begin his search of an icebound territory as big as all the New England states. And what was it he was searching for? He was searching for evidence that a crime had been committed. If the Eskimos had really killed a white man, Ren Frew must prove it. He must find witnesses who could tell who it was that had done the killing. Then he must find the killer and arrest him. To do all this, Ren Frew had to live with the Eskimos and gain their friendship. Of course, he knew their language, and soon he knew all the Eskimos at Pond's Inlet. But winning their friendship was another matter. The Eskimos soon learned that Ren Frew was a redcoat of the famous Mounted Police, and it made them afraid of him. And this, Ren Frew knew, was serious, because when primitive people get scared, they're liable to kill the man that they're afraid of. But Ren Frew couldn't play safe. He had a job to do. He had to stay in the village, constantly mingle with the natives, and pretend that he had no fear as he listened to their gossip and asked them dangerous questions. Then a fortunate thing happened. One day, late in August, a great bull walrus was seen out on the offshore ice, and Ren Frew stood on the shore and watched while the Eskimo hunters jumped into their little kayaks with harpoons and spears to try and kill the huge animal for its meat and oil and blubber. It was a thrilling sport, and it needed great courage, too, for the walrus is a tough customer. He weighs more than a ton, his flippers can smash a boat, and his great tusks can kill a polar bear. To kill it, the Eskimos had to paddle in as close as they dared and fling their harpoons for a vital spot, because a wounded walrus is dangerous. Ren Frew saw that because of this, none of the hunters dared get close enough to score a hit, and the big bull walrus just sat on the edge of the ice and seemed to laugh at them. Then, suddenly, Ren Frew saw one Eskimo whisk his kayak up right under the big brute's nose. He recognized the hunter as a young man named Renungak, and he was surprised at his daring, because Renungak was a cripple. He'd lost part of one foot and 3 fingers of his right hand by freezing. But in spite of this, young Renungak paddled close into the walrus and hurled his harpoon into the big bull's throat. Ren Frew was so moved by admiration for the courage of that crippled young Eskimo that he couldn't wait to greet him when he ran his kayak onto the shore again. Ren Frew strode forward, and he warmly shook the young Eskimo's crippled hand. And you know, Renungak's eyes fairly blazed with pride and gratification at this tribute to his heroism from the renowned and mighty redcoat. After that, Renungak became Ren Frew's devoted friend, and it was out of that friendship that Ren Frew found the thing that he was searching for. "You are a redcoat," Renungak said to him one day, "and the redcoats always come to find missing men. So you must be looking for the white man, Slade. I can tell you about him." "You can tell me where he is?" cried Ren Frew. "Where can I find him?" "Go to Cape Crawford," said Renungak. "You will find the white man there." Now this was good news, for it looked as if the rumors were wrong and that Slade might still be alive. But to reach Cape Crawford by land meant a 500-mile trip over stony ridges with no way of carrying supplies. Ren Frew's only chance was to make it by water. 200 miles across an open bay where broken ice floes tossed and ground in the waves when the wind was high. Through his friendship with Renungak, Ren Frew got the use of a big Eskimo boat made of skins stretched across ribs of driftwood, and then he got a crew of 5 Eskimos. He took with him a dog team and a month's provisions. But Renungak couldn't go with him because he had to hunt for meat to feed the people of the village. That boat never reached Cape Crawford. Midway across the bay, it ran into a gale which lashed the ice-filled waters into great combers. It would have battered the boat to pieces if Ren Frew hadn't rigged a sail that swept them into a rocky shore. As it was, the boat was smashed open on the rocks as they made a landing. Before they could repair the boat, the drift ice piled up on the shore, and that made further sailing impossible. So Ren Frew had to make the trip to Cape Crawford by land. To do that, he had to build a sled out of the ruined boat's timbers and wait until winter closed in and the snow fell so that the sled could travel. It was November before they started out, and a temperature of 77 below zero. In a week, the dog food was exhausted, and during the next week, 4 of the animals died. Finally, more dead than alive, Ren Frew reached a hunting camp of Eskimos. And there, among the hunters, was Renungak. Renungak greeted his white friend joyfully and eagerly consented to go with Ren Frew to Cape Crawford. He brought fresh provisions along and 2 of his friends with new and stronger dogs. The gales swept the rocky barrens with moving walls of wind that was colder than ice. Both men and dogs were almost whipped by hunger and exhaustion when a few days before Christmas they arrived at Cape Crawford. And there they found Robert Slade, but not alive. Under a mass of snow and gravel in a shallow ravine, they found his body, buried in one of his own packing cases. Ripping open the wooden box, Ren Frew examined the body and found that Slade had been shot through the head and chest. So he knew then that the rumors had been true. A murder had been committed. But he now had to find the murderer. To do this, he decided he would have to visit every Eskimo village on Baffin Island and do a first-rate job of detecting. So the tough, cruel traveling began again. The first village he came to was at Arctic Bay. He sent Renungak ahead, and the Eskimo came back with the ominous message that the people would not allow any white man to enter that village. They didn't know Ren Frew had found Slade's body, and they were afraid that he would learn too much. And when he heard that, Ren Frew felt certain that the man who killed Slade was living in that village. So he played a daring trick. Uncovering the body of Slade, which the icy cold of the Arctic had preserved in perfect condition, he placed it on top of his sled and ran his dogs right into the village. It worked. The Eskimos were dumbfounded. Ren Frew pointed to the undeniable evidences of the crime. "You see," he said, "he has been shot. Who did it?" For a moment, Ren Frew saw the Eskimos fingering their spears, and 2 of them crawled out of the igloos with rifles in their hands. But suddenly, the head man halted them. "It is no use resisting," he said. "It was Nukadla who killed the white man." And that started all the Eskimos talking at once. Out of their excited chatter, Ren Frew got the true story of how Slade had been killed and why. It seemed that Slade was a thoroughly bad man. He had cheated the Eskimos and terrorized them. When he came to trade with them, they were kind to him and friendly, but there was no end to his greed. A young hunter named Nukadla had taken Slade into his home, and Slade had proceeded to treat Nukadla like a slave, stealing his furs, beating and bullying him. When Nukadla resisted, Slade drove him out of his own house and said he would kill him if he returned. So Nukadla took counsel with the elders of the village, and it was decided that Slade should die before he carried out his threat to kill Nukadla. The next evening, an Eskimo went to Slade's igloo and told him there was a hunter outside with many fine fox skins. Slade crawled out of his igloo and found Nukadla facing him with a rifle in his hands. Nukadla fired, and Slade fell. Then Nukadla fired again. That was the end of Slade. "Where is Nukadla?" asked Ren Frew. Well, Nukadla was at Hecla Strait, 200 miles away. Ren Frew made a mental note that he had more traveling to do. "And who," he demanded, "is the Eskimo who told Slade that Nukadla had fox skins to sell?" "He is standing beside you," said the head man. And Ren Frew's heart fell when he turned and found Renungak standing beside him. "You had a part in this," he cried. "You helped to kill this white man?" "I helped to free my people," said Renungak, "from a thief and a murderer." "But why did you tell me?" asked Ren Frew. "Why did you lead me to where the body was?" "Because you are a good white man," said the Eskimo. "I knew that anything you did would be the right thing. I knew it would be good for my people." And Ren Frew looked at him and he knew that he looked on one of the finest men he would ever meet in this world. Renungak had sacrificed his own freedom for the good of his own people, and so that justice could be done, even if it brought him a prison sentence. And he went further than that. He stuck by Ren Frew against the fear and resentment of the Eskimos. He worked with him through all the hazards and cruelties of winter traveling until Ren Frew had found Nakudla and arrested him. And together with Nakudla, Renungak went down to Fort Churchill as Ren Frew's devoted friend and willing prisoner, because he trusted him. At the trial, Ren Frew brought out such clear evidence of Slade's brutality and stealing that Nakudla was considered to have acted faithfully according to the Eskimo Code of Justice and killed Slade practically to protect his people. So he was given a fairly short prison sentence, and Renungak was allowed to serve out his sentence for helping in the crime by acting as Ren Frew's sled driver on a great patrol which Ren Frew made to open up new regions of the North. And that's the end of the story of Ren Frew of the Mounted, which is so true to life that you can find the details of this story as they actually occurred in the headquarters files of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Thank you, Laurie York Erskine, for another one of your many authentic stories gathered from the files of the Canadian Mounted Police. Stories of adventure in the uncharted wilderness of the frozen North by Ren Frew of the Mounted. In closing, may I remind you again that tonight's program was presented only as an experiment and will not be heard regularly unless requested by a sufficient number of our listeners. If you would like to hear more adventures of Ren Frew, write a card tonight to Ren Frew, R-E-N-F-R-E-W, care of WNBC, New York 20, New York. We will appreciate your comments on Ren Frew of the Mounted. Tonight's program came to you from our studios in Radio City.